In 2004, U.S. Navy radar operators detected something they couldn't explain.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a mystery that has literally captivated the entire world: the Pentagon UAP videos. We're going to break down exactly what happened, and we're doing it by sticking strictly to the raw data, the first-hand pilot testimonies, and the official government intelligence reports. So we're stripping away all the science fiction and just focusing on the hard facts.
Okay, let's kick things off with a pretty massive question. What actually happens when the world's most advanced military encounters something it just cannot identify? To figure that out, we have to jump back to a really high-stakes moment in November 2004, right off the coast of Southern California. I mean, imagine you're sitting in the cockpit of a multi-million-dollar Navy fighter jet, you've got the absolute best sensor technology on the planet at your fingertips, and you come face-to-face with something that completely defies every single hour of your training. That is exactly what happened to highly trained naval aviators, and it set off a total chain reaction that eventually forced the Pentagon to publicly admit that, well, our skies are not always as secure or as understood as we might think.
Section 1. The Tic Tac Encounter.
This paradigm-shifting event is still one of the most compelling cases in modern military history. To really grasp the sheer scale of it, listen how Navy pilot Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich described it. She said it outright: it didn't adhere to our understanding of physics and gravity. She and Commander David Fravor were just out on a routine training mission when they were suddenly diverted by the USS Princeton cruiser to check out a real-world radar anomaly. The radar operators had literally been tracking targets dropping 80,000 feet in less than a second, and when the pilots actually arrived at the location, what they saw changed absolutely everything. Picture this. They look down at the ocean and see this patch of violently churning white water, but there's no apparent source for the disturbance. And hovering just above that roiling water is a 40-foot, smooth, matte white object. The pilots ended up affectionately calling it the Tic Tac because, honestly, it looked exactly like a giant breath mint. As Commander Fravor descended to get a closer look, the object actively mirrored his movements. It was completely aware of their presence. And then, get this, without any wings, without visible flight control surfaces, or even exhaust plumes, it instantaneously accelerated and just vanished.
Now, before we get too deep into the weeds, let's quickly clarify our terms. You are going to hear UAP a lot today. That stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. It's the modern official terminology the Department of Defense uses to classify these unexplained airborne encounters. The military made a very deliberate move away from the classic term UFO. They wanted to strip away all that pop culture stigma and focus purely on the scientific and national defense implications of these anomalies.
And this whole mystery really builds across a fascinating timeline. We can map out these distinct eras, starting with those wild Nimitz radar tracks back in 2004. Then we move into a sustained period of encounters by the USS Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group in 2014 and 2015. After that, the whole thing just explodes into the public eye, with the New York Times leaks in 2017, which directly leads to the landmark ODNI report in 2021, and culminates in the massive, ongoing 2026 Presidential Declassification Initiative.
Section 2. 3 famous UFO videos.
So while the pilot testimony is undeniably incredible, the actual physical evidence for these encounters rests heavily on 3 famous pieces of declassified thermal footage. These were captured by incredibly advanced Navy targeting pods, and you've probably heard of them: FLIR 1, Gimbal, and GoFast. They were originally leaked to the press in 2017 by Christopher Mellon, a former defense official, and then, remarkably, they were officially authenticated by the Pentagon in April 2020. The Department of Defense actually released them to clear up public misconceptions, stating definitively that the objects in the footage remain characterized as unidentified. These 3 videos form the absolute cornerstone of the public's modern fascination with UAPs.
Now, the Gimbal video in particular, it perfectly captures the core debate of this entire topic. On one side, you've got the physical anomaly hypothesis, the idea that we're looking at a controlled craft rotating against 120 knot winds without any visible means of propulsion. Wild, right? But on the flip side, you have the sensor artifact hypothesis. This argues that as the targeting pod tracks a heat source, the camera's internal gimbal mechanism rotates to correct the image. So under that theory, we're just seeing a thermal glare rotate on a screen, not a physical object rotating in the actual sky. It is a massive analytical divide.
Section 3. Investigating the evidence. To keep things objective here, we really have to balance the shock of the pilots with rigorous, scientific investigation. Skeptical investigators like science writer Mick West rightly point out a fundamental biological limitation we all share. As West puts it, our human brains simply have not evolved to look at things that are high in the sky. Judging distance, speed, and size when you're 5 miles up in the atmosphere or looking down at a featureless ocean is incredibly difficult. Even for highly experienced fighter pilots, visual illusions are just a very real, documented hazard of the job.
And when we do look through that skeptical lens, some pretty prosaic possibilities start to emerge. Take the GoFast video, for example. Skeptics point to the parallax effect, which is basically an optical illusion where a slow-moving object looks like it's going incredibly fast just because the jet filming it is speeding by. We also have to consider infrared glare masking normal jet tailpipes, making them look like glowing saucers, or even camera bokeh effects, turning out-of-focus stars into triangle-shaped ships. And then there's perhaps the most concerning possibility for the military: advanced electronic warfare. The idea that foreign adversaries might be spoofing our radar sensors to project false targets and test our vulnerabilities.
Section 4. The official government response.
Okay, so with the pilot evidence and the skeptical analysis firmly on the table, how did the United States intelligence community finally weigh in on decades of these encounters? Well, in June 2021, after being mandated by Congress, the ODNI released a landmark preliminary report, and this was a massive shift. For the first time, the government was officially and openly attempting to categorize these military encounters, pulling together data from the Navy, the FBI, and various intelligence agencies.
The really crucial takeaway here is the hard data: 144. Out of 144 U.S. government UAP reports reviewed by the task force between 2004 and 2021, exactly 80 of those incidents involved observations across multiple advanced military sensors. We are talking radar, infrared, electro-optical, and visual observation, all corroborating the presence of a physical object. So this wasn't just a weather glitch popping up on one single screen.
But this next number is the one that's truly startling: 18. In 18 of those incidents, military observers reported highly unusual movement patterns or flight characteristics. Objects appeared to just remain completely stationary in high winds aloft, or they maneuvered abruptly and moved at considerable speeds, all without any discernible means of propulsion.
So, what did the Pentagon actually conclude from all this? Ultimately, they realized that UAPs don't have a single, neat explanation. The data was just too limited to draw one firm conclusion. Instead, they sorted these encounters into 5 broad categories. You've got airborne clutter, like birds or deflating balloons. You've got natural atmospheric phenomena, like ice crystals. Then there are highly classified U.S. developmental programs, foreign adversary systems, and finally, a catch-all other category. And because of that other category, many of the most famous cases were left officially, stubbornly unresolved.
The intelligence community is actually pretty frank about the fact that solving this mystery is an uphill battle. Gathering concrete data is severely hampered by 2 huge hurdles. First, military sensors are designed to track conventional enemy aircraft, not erratic, unpredictable anomalies. And second, there's a lingering socio-cultural stigma. For decades, there's been this culture of disparagement that has prevented pilots from reporting what they see simply out of fear for their careers.
But, the push for transparency is definitely winning out. This whole movement culminated in a 2026 presidential declassification directive, which led to the release of 162 previously unsealed, unresolved UAP incident reports to the public. Thanks to multi-agency efforts, documents, videos, and eyewitness accounts are now out there for public review. However, officials did note one very important caveat. These files still do not contain confirmed evidence of extraterrestrial technology.
And that leaves us right here, at the cutting edge of a deeply complex issue.
This ongoing release of information really challenges us to keep investigating objectively. It leaves us with a pretty massive question to ponder. As the government archives continue to open, and as civilian and military analysts parse through all this data, are we finally getting closer to the truth, or is this modern mystery only just beginning? Keep questioning, keep looking at the data, and we will catch you next time on The Explainer.